Bienvenidos a Cuando las personas woke son destruidas. En este vídeo analizaremos cómo algunas voces logran desafiar la cultura woke en diversos debates. Es innegable que muchas ideas de esta cultura pueden parecer desconectadas de la realidad. Al ser cuestionadas, a menudo se revelan sus falencias. Además, el rechazo al diálogo y la autocrítica puede hacer que ciertos discursos se conviertan en blancos fáciles. ¿Hasta qué punto la cultura woke ha caído en la trampa de la cancelación, olvidando la importancia del debate constructivo? Quiero saber qué piensan ustedes. ¿Creen que hay una manera de reconciliar estas posturas? Dejen sus comentarios y comparten sus opiniones. Su voz es fundamental en esta conversación. No se lo pierdan. Las personas woke antes eran consideradas una minoría, pero han irrumpido en la escena como una bomba cultural.
Primeras criticaron a la protagonista, ya que esta ahora sería una chica afroamericana de las ciudades. Y segundo, por varios personajes que fueron añadidos o mostrados en el capítulo filtrado. En especial algunos que eran descritos en la Biblia como no binarios y extremadamente.
Hoy en día parece que no puedes dar la vuelta sin toparte con alguien ondeando la bandera woke. Han pasado de ser los desfavorecidos a controlar el panorama, tomando decisiones en todo, desde el deporte.
Nos metemos de lleno con la polémica olímpica que nos tuvo a todos muy ocupados, opinando, pensando qué pasó, pero arranquemos por lo estrictamente deportivo. Tibu, ¿qué es lo que pasó que disparó todo esto?
Un combate, welter, la categoría femenino, en los Juegos Olímpicos. Por un lado estaba Angela Carini, la italiana.
¿Del otro lado?
Y del otro lado...
¿Cuánto tiempo estuvieron en el ring? ¿Poco?
Muy poco, 46 segundos.
Nada.
Porque Iman Khelif, la argelina,
¡pum!
Pegó dos golpes, uno llegó
vemos
a golpearle muy fuerte en la nariz. Y Angela Carini se acercó a su rincón para pedirle abandono. Mujeres son con cromosomas XX, XX. Los hombres, XY.
Exacto. Ella tiene estos cromosomas
XY. Para el deporte, en la internacional boxeo comité, que es la que regula el mundial, dice no puede competir.
Claro.
Para el Comité Olímpico Internacional, el COI, puede competir.
Hasta las aulas de tus hijos. Pero no todos están comprando lo que este grupo está promoviendo. Veremos a 5 personas directas y sin filtros, armadas solo con hechos y sentido común. Este es el momento en que las personas woke son desenmascaradas al instante, comenzando con el enfrentamiento entre el senador Rand Paul, médico de profesión, y Rachel Levine sobre la medicina transgénero y su aplicación en menores. Pero Levine no da respuestas claras. Tenemos al senador Paul armado con su experiencia médica y una actitud sin rodeos. Por otro lado, Rachel Levine esquivando preguntas como Neo en The Matrix. Pensarías que un simple sí o no sería suficiente, pero aparentemente no en el mundo de la política woke. Escucha con atención.
Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I will look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor. I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breast amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake, but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we have believed that minors don't have full rights and the parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question.
En todo el vídeo, el senador Paul presentó hechos claros, respaldándolos con ejemplos, mientras que Levine evitó dar respuestas directas. En su lugar, Levine desvió el tema diciendo que la medicina transgénero es un asunto complejo y sugiriendo discutirlo más adelante. Está claro que cuando alguien evita responder una pregunta tan directa es porque sabe que está equivocado. Pero espera, porque Paul no ha terminado.
The question is a very specific one. Should minors be making these momentous decisions? For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER. But you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty, and you think they get that back? You give a woman testosterone enough that she grows a beard, you think she's going to go back looking like a woman when you stop the testosterone? You have permanently changed them. Infertility is another problem. None of these drugs have been approved for this. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that went nuts over hydroxychloroquine being used possibly for COVID are not alarmed that these hormones are being used off-label. There's no long-term studies. We don't know what happens to them. We do know that there are dozens and dozens of people who've been through this who regret that this happened and a permanent change happened to them. And, you know, if you've ever been around children, 14-year-olds can't make this decision. In the gender dysphoria clinic in England, 10% of the kids are between the ages of 3 and 10. We should be outraged that someone's talking to a 3-year-old about changing their sex. I can't vote for you if you can't.
Thank you so much, Senator Paul.
Es ridículo que ambos sean médicos, pero sus enfoques no podrían ser más diferentes. Uno está comprometido a proteger a los niños oponiéndose al uso de medicamentos transgénero no autorizados, priorizando su seguridad por encima de todo. Mientras tanto, el otro parece estar motivado por el beneficio económico, aprovechando este movimiento woke sin importar las posibles consecuencias que estos niños enfrentarán en su adultez. Pero Levine no fue la única cuestionada sobre la prohibición del cuidado de afirmación de género para menores. Cuando un estudiante universitario confrontó a Matt Walsh sobre el mismo tema, incluso él tuvo que retroceder.
Why in your movies and your discussions do you selectively ignore and misrepresent the recent burgeoning medical and behavioral literature that demonstrates that gender-affirming care and similar medical interventions demonstrate consistent improvements to mental health, suicidality, and general well-being?
Which study are those?
There are probably like 30 studies by this point, all produced in the last like 10 years or so. Anybody can look them up on...
Okay, well just, here's the problem. Here's the problem. I'm not impressed by just you saying a study,
No,
okay? Because
studies.
Fine. Well, there could be 100 studies. There could be 1,000
read
studies.
them.
Great. Yeah, and I have read them. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So I'll give you one example. I don't know if you can give me any examples, but I'll give you one example of a recent study and this was just in the headlines. It said that it proved that double mastectomies for minor girls improves their well-being. And this was a study, and it was proven, peer-reviewed. Then you read how they actually conducted this study, and you find out that they interviewed a very small selection of girls in one region of the country, all from the same socioeconomic background, and they did their follow-up, I think it was 3 months later. And based on a follow-up a few months later, they've determined that, oh yeah, it improves well-being. You see the problem here? No, I don't.
There are many, but this is the exception to the rule. Many of
I don't think it is.
Use observational data, with various follow-up from like 6 months to 5 years to 10 years, and they don't demonstrate what you claim.
Well, you can say the word study, but what I'm saying is when you
look them up.
Okay, great, great.
You can Google them.
Yeah, and so can you. It sounds like you have them.
I've done it a good bit.
Oh, you've done it a good bit. Okay, all right. Well, I just gave you an
transgender health, PubMed, NIH, gender affirming care, and I mean it's.
Okay, let me ask you what.
El argumento de este chico se desmorona rápidamente, ya que no proporciona evidencia real para respaldar sus afirmaciones. Es responsabilidad de quien hace una afirmación presentar pruebas y simplemente decirles a los demás que lo busquen en Google no es un argumento válido. Usar la palabra estudio sin ser específico es perezoso y débil, pero Matt Walsh desmonta calmadamente todo el argumento de Jacob, exponiendo metódicamente las fallas en sus respuestas vagas sobre el cuidado de afirmación de género para niños. Observa cómo Matt derrumba sus puntos sin esfuerzo.
Jacob, here's what I know. If you want to even begin to claim that a study has proven that castrating and sterilizing little boys helps them in the long run, then you would need to have a large sample size of children who've gone through these procedures, and we've checked back with them in adulthood to see how they're doing. Those studies do not exist. They can't exist because we weren't doing this to kids at anywhere near this scale even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. What that tells us, Jacob, is that the kids we have right now, they are the sample. Okay, they are the experiment. We are experimenting on children right now.
That's just demonstrably, you can easily demonstrate that that's not the
And
case.
are you, Jacob, are you able to just use your common sense as well? I mean, you can rely on studies and you can just shout the word study at me and then start,
No, I'm not
you can start, let me finish.
Sorry.
You can shout about studies and list random medical organizations. That doesn't impress me. There was a time when every medical organization would have told you that, you know, bloodletting is the way to cure every disease. There was a time when every medical organization told you that the vaccine, you know, stopped transmission. So, but here's what I want to know. Are we able to just use common sense as well? And based on common sense, determine that it is certainly not a good idea to sterilize and castrate children and remove body parts from children before they are possibly old enough to consent to those procedures. Don't we know that just based on basic moral decency and common sense?
Sure, but you're trying to make causal statements about the impacts of medical interventions. You need to demonstrate that with science, and I'm not mentioning, and I'm not like making an ethos argument, oh, like look at this organization. I'm saying that there are like very rigorous ways to substantiate your claims, and the people that are spending lots of time are doing that, and they come to conclusions that are very different from the ones that you say. I'm not making an appeal to ethos. Anybody can look up these studies and just see how they're done.
Right, and these are also studies being done by the people who it just so happens are profiting from the procedures that they say work, which is really interesting. But
do you think your professors are getting paid by like some?
Yeah, a lot of them are.
Do you think there's somebody like paying your professors for? I think you should.
How do you think it works, Jacob?
Because that's very unrealistic.
Do you think they're not being paid?
No.
They ain't doing this for free, I tell you that.
No. They're definitely being paid. But like, if there's some shady organization paying them, like, I'm sorry, that's sort of silly. Like, talk with your professors. That's like sort of silly.
Okay. Let me
How
just
can
ask.
you know anything? There's always some conspiracy.
I think you can know things without asking for permission sometimes from professors to say that you know them.
No, I'm just saying.
And one of those things that you can know is that it's never okay to castrate a child. I mean, I don't need... Jacob, you...
Thank you, Matt.
Okay. All right. Good conversation.
Las respuestas de Matt Walsh a ese chico fueron sobresalientes. Lanzó verdades una tras otra, desmantelando cada punto que Jacob intentaba hacer. Con cada argumento bien articulado, Walsh lo dejó sin palabras, intentando encontrar una respuesta, pero no había forma de escapar de los hechos. A medida que avanzaba el debate, se hizo evidente que Jacob no tenía una base sólida en la que apoyarse, y finalmente no le quedó más remedio que marcharse derrotado. Pero, ¿qué sucede cuando alguien del movimiento woke intenta imponer sus creencias a presentadores de televisión? ¿Se contendrán porque es en vivo? Esta situación ocurrió cuando un canal de noticias del Reino Unido invitó a un invitado a debatir sobre un anuncio de Nike promocionando sostenes para mujeres. La controversia surgió porque el anuncio presentaba a una persona trans, lo que enfureció a los presentadores.
Listen to me. So it is, whereas this person is a 26-year-old person, and they are trying to,
rich.
Well, they,
Rich.
well, they might be doing
No
very well.
sympathy. Are you about to make us supposedly feel sorry for this person?
No, what I'm saying, this is a trans person wearing leggings. Everybody needs to calm the hell down.
Sam, have you watched it?
Sam, yes,
Sam,
of course I've watched all of it.
It's not a trans person wearing leggings. It is a trans person mimicking, caricaturing a woman.
That's what she does in her videos.
Promoting bras, sports bras for women.
And as a woman, I find it so disrespectful, Sam. I find it so why are you sticking up?
How is it disrespectful? She has 12 million followers, most of whom are women who will buy this because she's been wearing it. That's what Nike see. They see 12 million followers, and all she does is talk about positivity and fun and laughter, and that's what Nike want to get into. It's not raising women.
Él debería saber que eso es precisamente lo que esta agenda woke está haciendo, tratando de arrebatar derechos a las mujeres biológicas. Pero estos presentadores no lo iban a dejar escapar tan fácilmente, porque cuando el invitado hace una declaración inimaginable, se desata una tormenta en el debate, lo que lleva a un momento en el que lo humillan por completo frente a todos los que estaban viendo el programa.
That's what Nike want to get into.
It's raising women.
It's not raising women.
It is.
The rest of Nike's Instagram feed are all cis white women, or just cis women in general.
Hey! Do not come into the studio and call me a cis woman. Otherwise, I would
call you a cis woman.
Cis women, do not use that term. Otherwise, I will eject you from the chair. A woman is a woman. I don't want to hear that again from your mouth.
Yes, that is what the rest of their feed is. So it's nothing to do with it's something to do with her. It's not her decision. It's Nike's decision, and she's just doing her job. So I mean, I think the attacks that she's had for it.
She looks like she's taking the total Mickey out of a woman. Have you seen her prancing and acting the way she is on that post?
She's a comedian.
Well, I don't find it funny.
That's what her videos are.
I don't find it funny,
because it's
Sam.
completely out of context.
Wait a minute. Whether she's a comedian or not, the point is that Nike are using a biological man to promote something that is really a properly female product. And what does that say to the other amazing female athletes that they could have selected, like Riley Gaines and people like that, who, whilst Nike obviously don't mean to cause any offence, but the backlash is, you saw the video of what happened to Riley Gaines. Yeah. She was chased out of this after doing a speech.
Well, I don't know what the context was for that, but
you see, the problem with it is that it promotes and it reinforces this kind of thing, and that's the problem for women.
And it's the biggest sports brand in the world. This is so wrong.
But she's not. You've already basically so many laws have already been passed, like various different sporting bodies, as Sharon Davis was talking about, where trans people aren't allowed to compete. So now you're saying that they're not allowed to wear women's sportswear either. So they can't compete or wear women's sportswear.
No, that's not what's been said.
It sounds like it.
You're putting words into my mouth. You're not a ventriloquist.
So tell me what it is. Should they just be erased altogether?
I'll tell you what's being said here. You do not need to use a trans woman to promote bras for women, because women could promote that themselves, and they don't need somebody who is not a woman.
Estas grandes corporaciones no se centran en difundir positividad o diversión, simplemente están tratando de aumentar sus ganancias capitalizando en esta locura woke. Este momento resalta que no todos seguirán esta agenda woke y muchos están listos para oponerse. Estas dos mujeres son verdaderas reinas por defender a miles de millones de otras mujeres, pero no fueron las únicas que se levantaron contra la cultura woke en este vídeo, porque en el siguiente debate acalorado una mujer inteligente deja completamente sin palabras a una persona no binaria.
That's true. I identify as non-binary, which means that I'm neither male nor female, and correspondent to that, I use the they, them pronoun.
And you say gender roles are damaging our society, so we need to think very carefully about language, yeah?
Yes, so a lot of our social selves are codified and encultured in the language that we use. We really use it to construct our entire society. And what's certainly true is that there is a huge variance of gender presentation and gender identity within humankind. There isn't simply
humankind,
men and women. Exactly, humankind in face of mankind.
You wouldn't say mankind, that should be, you know...
I wouldn't, just because humankind is a more accurate descriptor, in the same way that me using they, them is a more accurate descriptor of my identity than using he or she.
Would you use homo sapiens?
I very rarely in my life use scientific language to describe the people I work with.
Wise man, it means. Okay. But it's something, do we need to think about that?
I think we certainly should be thinking about the evolution of language to support gender neutrality.
Yeah, got you.
And that's for a number of reasons. The first of which is that it stops this assumption that either the most important people in the room are men or that the only people in the room are men. And secondly, it does include that wider spectrum of gender. There's an excellent quote by German linguist Louisa Pusch, who says that gender and language should be both comfortable and fair. And she was referring to German, which is one of the most strictly gender-codified languages in Europe.
German.
And English is not...
What's happening in German?
So German has a grammatical gender and a gendered pronominal system. So they use gendered pronouns and they have gendered nouns, and that's supported by the wider grammar of the language. But actually the German state is encouraging lecturers, professionals and industry to use gender-neutral language.
God, I might have got an A if that had been back.
Well, so in universities, a bit like the University of Hull, universities in Germany, their lecturers are using gender-neutral language to refer to students because it's inclusive of everyone and gives that space for trans people who are neither male nor female.
Yeah. Courtesy is all very well. I mean, you're describing encouraging people to use certain words. My problem is when words are policed, when language becomes policed. That is my problem. I mean, if it's, look, we can all go back to... We can all go back, those sorts of things, humankind or mankind, I mean, those are sort of interchangeable now, they're synonymous anyway. We're talking about when people actively, and it is a minority of activists, it really is a minority, seek to have people disciplined or sacked because they refuse to use language that they are imposing. That's not the evolution of language, that's the imposition of language, and I think that's problematic.
Transgender people?
There are a tiny minority of people who have intersex conditions, and there are a tiny minority of people who have some condition where they may have a female brain and a male body. Apart from this, we are all male and female, and the attempt to suggest that there is a third gender is, as far as I'm concerned, it's an ideological and a political project. It doesn't exist. The words male and female have existed throughout history, throughout the world. They refer, men are people who have penises, women are people who have vaginas. It's as simple as that. I would absolutely refuse to refer to this woman here, who's clearly a woman, as a they, because for me that would be imposing an ideological political system. Because she is. If everybody watching this programme can see that she is a woman. And that is imposing.
That's your problem. I think that's actually your
imposing.
But you're imposing.
No, you are asking me to engage in an ideological political system which I disagree with. I believe we are all male and female.
By what they should be called is imposing an ideological system.
No,
I really want to come back and address just some of the scientific inaccuracies of...
Your respect for me is already diminished if you insist that I ascribe to some ideology of third gender, which I do not agree with. If this he and she is socially constructed, how come everybody watching this, everybody in the audience, can basically identify male and female just by looking? Occasionally there are people who are more difficult to identify, and we try to be tactful, but it's not just socially ascribed, it relates to a physical reality reflected in our voices, our appearances, in all kinds of ways.
Isn't life a great spectrum?
Es absurdo que se espere que el resto de nosotros interactuemos con los delirios de los demás y si no lo hacemos se nos etiqueta como transfóbicos. Si respetar las creencias de otras personas es tan importante, ¿por qué las nuestras se consideran menos válidas? El hecho es que solo hay dos géneros y esta locura debe detenerse por el bien de nuestros hijos y las generaciones futuras. Pero si pensabas que eso era ridículo, espera a ver el próximo. Nuestro último Wokey está tan fuera de control que es difícil ponerlo en palabras. Solo mira.
But now when it comes to sex, children don't have the accumulated knowledge. You acknowledge that.
You're
saying children can change sex, but they can't have sex. Why is
you
that
are
different
doing
standard?
the hate group thing where you're mishmashing predatory things with kids understanding their own genders and their own identities. Predatory sexual behavior is not the same thing as people being trans. They are different things. You cannot put them in the same group.
I'd say indoctrinating children to believe that they're born in the wrong body and that they need to change their body to find true happiness. I'd say that's a pretty predatory.
No one is being indoctrinated.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Don't you think it's predatory, though, to, for example, give a double mastectomy to a 12, 13-year-old girl?
I don't think it's predatory
You
because
think that's
like
okay?
people have to go through a lot of counseling in order to get to that point.
Not so much anymore.
I disagree with you. I know a lot of trans kids.
How old are they?
That's none of your business.
Well, you brought it up.
Los niños no están siendo adoctrinados. Tal vez ella no haya visto la sexta parte de esta serie en nuestro canal. Espera, tú tampoco la has visto. Entonces, definitivamente deberías verla después de esta. Ahora continuemos con las tonterías que nuestro wokey-dokey tiene que decir.
I'm not saying that you are actively going forth and working to oppress people, although you are. I am
By saying
saying
we shouldn't sterilize and mutilate kids, I'm oppressing them?
you're not.
How is it not
sterilizing
sterilizing them?
I mean,
Well, just
people
prove them
have-
wrong. Why don't you just educate them?
If you
You know,
think
mid-
that people are just there to like put forward and be baby making factories, then maybe in your head that's what it is, but people are so much more than that, and most trans adults wish that they could have changed puberty at when they were initially going into puberty.
Why?
Because then there's always going to be traits in adulthood that are going to be corresponded to a different gender.
Like what?
Things that the world looks at and says
So
maybe
aesthetics.
is more.
So I don't think that it's right to sterilize a child, cut apart children over aesthetics, over looks.
I mean,
you know that that's not right.
And let's talk about this.
I don't think that we are like destroying children because they remove or change a particular aspect. That is not what I think is destroying. I think what you are doing is destroying like the soul of people and making people at so much more risk of being persecuted and denied rights and denied to be allowed to like exist in the world.
So little girls, you think, have a right to double mastectomies. At what age?
Well, one, I disagree with your gendering, and two, I think that is up to the adults
Wait,
in
why
their
do you
lives.
disagree with the gendering? What do you mean?
Because you just said little girls, and if somebody
Oh
is
my
so,
God! Are you...
I think you are misgendering people that are coming out as trans and moving forward. Like, and
Oh, you mean
also,
those girls are actually little boys. Is what you mean.
I don't know what their identity is, and neither do you.
¿De verdad se acaba de ofender por usar el género incorrecto para una niña hipotética? Está abogando por que los niños hagan la transición antes de que lleguen a la pubertad. Eso significa que apoyaría que una niña se haga una mastectomía doble antes de que le hayan desarrollado los senos. Es una pendiente resbaladiza y su argumento pierde todo sentido cuando se consideran las implicaciones. Este clip fue tomado del canal de James Cloak y te recomiendo que lo veas. Estoy tratando de llegar a los 100.000 suscriptores para finales de año. Si quieres luchar contra esta cultura progresista, asegúrate de suscribirte para ver más vídeos como este.